Michella Chester here with NCAA Digital. I am joined by Patrick Donnelly, Evan Marinofsky. These are NCAA ice hockey experts. I mean, Patrick's our NCAA.com ice hockey beat reporter, and Evan, our former ice hockey beat reporter. I don't want to start any drama between you two, but I'm bringing you both on.
I'm excited to do this. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, I'm happy to get going.
All right, guys, so let's start with men's. We're going to talk men's and women's ice hockey, but we'll do men's storylines first. Patrick, I'll start with you. Let's talk about men's ice hockey early in the season. I know you kind of want to talk about Michigan, so I'll let you go there.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to at least think of Michigan right off the bat when you're thinking of men's hockey storylines to watch this year. You know, last year, high-flying offense, they kind of get shut down in the Frozen Four. And then they lose all their big players, you know, Owen Power, Matty Beniers, Kent Johnson, etc., all turned pro. There's the whole saga with Mel Pearson, the former head coach, and his contract over the summer. Then there was the independent investigation. He ends up getting let go by the program. So they bring in Brendan Naruto as the interim, and they also return Luke Hughes, Hobie Baker finalist, as well as, you know, starting goaltender Eric Portillo. So the core is still in place, and they have one of the best incoming freshman classes in Division I between, you know, Frank Nazar, Rutger McGroarty, two first-round picks, and also Adam Fantilli, who's projected to go top 3, maybe even number 1 if Connor Bedard up in the CHL didn't exist this year. So they still have that core in place, but, you know, just the circus offseason they had, it's really interesting to see how they respond coming out of the gate.
Yeah, Michigan's a really interesting case because, I mean, Michelle, I remember you and I talking about it last year, just how star-studded that team was. And, you know, they lose a lot of those guys, but then they bring all these other stars in. You know, Adam Fantilli, Pat mentioned, like Adam Fantilli is potentially the number 2 overall pick in the 2023 draft. So I don't think they're going to miss a beat. I think obviously for a lot of these freshmen, you know, it's going to take some time to adjust. But I do think they're going to be a really strong second half team. I mean, in the Big Ten, you know, Michigan's obviously kind of the team, but I also look at Minnesota. Like Minnesota also has a really good incoming freshman class, you know, with Logan Cooley. You know, you also returning Matthew Nyes, bringing him back, and I look at that team as well as, and this is something we talked about last year, Mikel, as well. Like Michigan versus Minnesota, they're always kind of going at each other's throats. I think this year the rivalry is going to be really, really hot, just given how good the recruiting classes are and just how strong those returning cores are. Because again, as I said, they're always going at each other. And Pat, you know it. Like it's a fun thing to watch throughout the year, just how good those two teams are and how they're going to be battling for spots atop the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten's really interesting too, because then you add in Notre Dame, who's top 10 team in the preseason poll and picked to finish second over Michigan and behind Minnesota in the Big Ten preseason poll. So I think that's just an interesting sleeper to watch coming out of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, with sleeper teams, you know, I'll go outside the Big Ten right here, and I look at a couple of Eastern schools. Quinnipiac, I expect to be really good this year. They're returning a lot of, returning guys from last year. Rand Pecknold's really, you know, has built something in 29 years there that I think a lot of teams would kill for. You also look, Providence is another one that I look at as a sleeper team. Not even sleeper. I mean, they're top 10 teams, but, you know, they're just outside of that top 5 that we always kind of look at. And you even look at, you know, Northeastern. BU is another team I look at with 10 returning seniors. Like I look at those Eastern teams. I think they're going to give those Midwestern teams a serious run for their money throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, you think of Quinnipiac and Northeastern, you know, with the 2 goalies, Yaniv Peretz and Devin Levi, they're going to obviously be in the mix. Providence, you know, Nate Lehman, for no matter what, is always going to have them in the polls. But I do like you mentioning BU, you know, always one of the most talented rosters on the East Coast. And for whatever reason, the last 4 or 5 years, haven't been able to get it done, haven't gotten the most out of it. But, you know, so far so good through one game, 8-2 win over Bentley. Again, it's maybe not the highest of challenges for BU early on here, but Jay Pandolfo seems to really be making the most of his fresh start as head coach.
Yeah, I think they've got it with Pandolfo. I think that was a terrific hire. I mean, kind of a no-brainer. He was on the staff, you know, former star there, great NHL player, you know, widely regarded as someone who I think a lot of people expected to be a college coach at some time. So, yeah, I mean, again, Pat, I'm hyping up your alma mater, but BU to me, again, as a team, I really see, which we'll get to later, really see kind of making a strong push throughout the season.
All right, guys, a lot of teams just mentioned. I'm going to make you make some championship picks. Let's start with you, Pat.
Oh man, this is where I have to kind of try and set aside the BU bias here, but I'm gonna go. This might be the tabloidy pick, but I'm gonna go with Michigan and BU. I think talent wins out, and Michigan's still loaded. I think Luke Hughes is just gonna go crazy this year, sort of like Cale McCarr did at Evans UMass a couple years ago. Could be Scott Morrow this year too. But I think just the talent on both of those rosters, it's just hard to see them not at least making some noise nationally, whether it's the Frozen Four or the championship game.
Well, Pat, I thought I was making a real hot take with BU in the final because my final is BU in Minnesota. That is my national championship. As I said before, BU does not usually have veterans on their team. They have 10 seniors this year. I think the mix with the new head coach, Drew Comesso in net, I think, obviously all the attention's on Devin Levi and Yanni Peretz and, different goalies throughout the nation, but Comesso is really good. And I think, with him being more experienced now, with that roster being experienced, with a great recruiting class, with like Lane Hudson, I look at that team and say, I think they might not be a top 5 team throughout the year, just given that there's North Dakota and Duluth and all those teams. But I do think they're going to make a real run in the tournament. They're going to be in the final. And then Minnesota, as I said before, they're going to be in the top 5 throughout the year. Matthew Nyes, I think, is going to have a terrific season. There were a lot of questions of him going to the NHL. So that's my pick. So we're pretty close. Michigan, BU, and Minnesota, BU. So we have 3 teams I guess we'll be rooting for this year. So our predictions might be correct. So yeah, I think those are our picks.
I like Minnesota a lot too, just between, it's felt like a huge break. They get Nyes back. Logan Cooley comes in, obviously a top prospect in the NCAA. And then, Brock Faber, the captain, he's not going to grab a lot of headlines like the other defensemen we've mentioned, like Scott Morrow, Luke Hughes, but he's rock solid back there. And there's a reason he's the captain. So
an Olympian.
I am.
All right, guys, so no fights yet, I see. I didn't start any major drama yet. Let's move over to women's. Let's talk some early season storylines for women's ice hockey. Patrick, I know you kind of wrote about in a few NCAA articles a lot of Olympians returning.
Yeah, I mean, especially at Wisconsin, they get Jesse Comfer, former BU standout, as well as BC gets Kayla Barnes back, standout defender, and Sarah Fillier, who for Canada is going to really challenge Marie-Philippe Poulin as the best player in the game in short order here. Just a lot of talent returning to the collegiate ranks this year, and a couple names that could easily be in the race for the top hardware at the end of the year. Especially Fillier, only 2 years at Princeton, kind of does the Poulin mold, I suppose, of taking that year off to go with the Olympic team and the national team. Won gold both at the Olympics and the World Championships this year. So she's a winner everywhere she's been, and she should be, again, a finalist for the Patty Caz this year.
Wisconsin's an interesting case because I don't want to say they missed expectations last year, but they kind of did, even though expectations are so high for them all the time. They're always winning. And I think last year was kind of weird for them. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of bounce back. But you look again at Ohio State and Minnesota. I mean, Ohio State, won last year. They're returning so many players. I mean, Sophie Jakes is just absurd. And I think that's my one player we're going to get to later on in this when we kind of talk about some, Patty Caz and Hobie Baker talk. But I just think Ohio State is so elite in every aspect of the game, offense, defense, and net. I think that's kind of the team for me. And again, Minnesota, Taylor Heisey as well, like, Patty Caz won last year. So I think that's going to be a very interesting conference. And I know we're going to talk about the East here in a bit, but I think all eyes are on that conference. But again, the East, which we'll get to in a sec, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Minnesota, too, getting Grace Zumwinkle back from the Olympics as well. So just further loading up those rosters, especially, WCHA is just a gauntlet every single year.
Yeah. Oh, no, the WCHA is ridiculous. I remember last year just how, when I was making my Power 10s every week, they were just always permeating the top 5. Out East, though, because, again, we're East, from the East Coast. We got to talk about the East, obviously. There's some really good teams. I mean, the ECAC is stacked. Colgate and Yale, that's a rivalry I'm watching all year. I think, you look at those are two, Yale's a very good defensive team. Colgate's very offensive. You put those against each other. They battled in the past. Colgate won the ECAC last year, I believe, but Yale went to the Frozen Four and beat it in the national tournament. Like, they have bad blood. And I look at those two teams and I say, those are teams I'm going to be watching quite a bit this year.
Yeah, the ECAC had one extra team in the tournament than the WCHA had, but obviously the top talent prevailed on the West Coast there, or Midwest, I suppose. But, you even look at Princeton getting Sarah Fillier back instantly makes them into the conversation for the ECAC championship. And whether we're going out of the ECAC here and into Hockey East, it's kind of in a transition, I think, between getting that parity, but Northeastern is still atop there. And, they lose Aaron Frankel and Skylar Fontaine, two of their rocks, but they keep Alina Mueller, Swiss Olympian. They keep Chloe O'Rourke, Maureen Murphy, who led the nation in goals last year and wasn't even a finalist for the Patty Caz. And, Gwyneth Phillip, who in a limited sample has been just as good as Frankel. Not saying she's going to be all-time program leader like Frankel was, but, they have the goaltending succession plan in place. And Mueller is just an absolute stud. So I think Northeastern, they got to the national championship a couple of years ago. Can they finally break through and get some of that hardware?
Phillips is an interesting case because Phillips, again, was kind of waiting in the wings for, 3 years behind Frankel. And it's an interesting case of like, why stay? But this is why you get to be a starter. And even, Northeastern has said she could have been a starter on any other team, really, just playing behind the best goalie in the nation, maybe even the world. So I think, again, like with her, it's going to be a really cool opportunity for her this year to step in, be the starter for a team that, as you said, has real national championship hopes.
All right. So, Evan, you mentioned you're pretty high on Ohio State. Let's do some women's ice hockey championship picks. We'll start with you this time, Evan.
Yeah, I'm going with Ohio State and Minnesota. I think those are the two that I look at, and I think that, they're the two best teams. I think they are both, hungry. I know Ohio State won last year, but I think Minnesota's hungry, and I think just put together, and they're going to be battling all year too, by the way. So that's going to be another interesting thing to watch. But yeah, that's my national championship pick.
I'm going to go Minnesota and Northeastern. Maybe a little bit of East Coast bias with Northeastern, but, the core is still there, and they have that experience of, getting there and experiencing what it's like to lose. So that's always important, and they still have the goaltending. And I think Minnesota, sort of like Ohio State, is just so loaded. The depth of that team, and they're going to be battle-tested coming out of that division, that conference, excuse me. I think that could be a very tantalizing national championship, I suppose.
All right, before I let you go, we've got a few more predictions to make. Let's talk Hobie Baker, Patty Kazmaier awards. Pat, we'll start with you. Let's hear your picks for both.
I'm really high on Luke Hughes, as I've already mentioned. I think he's instantly the best defenseman in the NCAA, if he wasn't already. Potentially the chance to be the best of the three Hughes brothers. And the Jack and Quinn are already stars in the NHL. So his stock is certainly on the rise. I think he'll have a great year for Michigan. He's probably my favorite for the Hobie Baker. But, don't count out Devin Levi or Yaniv Peretz, the two goalies in the East. Levi was an anomaly last year. Win the Mike Richter as the best goalie in the nation. All this hardware he got, and he wasn't even a finalist or top three finalist for the Hobie Baker. So I'm sure he'll definitely have something to prove. And Patty Caz, I've been saying her name a lot, but I got to go with Sarah Fillier. I think she's really going to make a statement at the NCAA level. She's already had that coming out party on the national stage with Canada. I think it's kind of her time to seize hold of that opportunity in NCAA. Excuse me.
Well, my Hobie Baker pick is same as yours, Pat. I think Luke Hughes, and it's tough because I want to pick someone else for the sake of fun. Like I do want to pick someone else, but Luke Hughes is just so good. And he, even as a freshman, he was commanding the game last year. Just every aspect of it. He was so good. Really, when Owen Power went away, Luke Hughes was there to kind of, be rock solid. So I just look at Hughes. He could be starring in the NHL right now if he really wanted to, but he's doing the 2 years as he should. So Hughes is my pick for the Hobie. Don't count out. I know you mentioned Peretz and Levi. I'm going to say Matthew Nyes. Don't count him out. I think he's going to have a terrific year. All eyes are going to be on him, especially kind of with the Toronto hopefuls there. I think they're going to be, all over him throughout the year. My Patty Kazmaier pick, Sophie Jakes. I think Sophie Jakes, she had such an outstanding year last year. I think, I'm so excited to see how her game grows. Like she was so good last year, so high in scoring. Where does it go from here? And I think just, her impact, I think she's absolutely going to be it this year. Don't count out Elle Hartshey from Yale. Really interesting pick. Someone that kind of carries the offense there a bit. So, I think she's going to be someone that kind of is in the mix for it. But I think Sophie Jakes is my pick.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for breaking this all down. Again, Patrick, our NCAA ice hockey beat reporter. Evan, still covering hockey up in New England. Thank you guys both so much for joining me. Appreciate it as always.